What's up? Oh no, here we go again. You look wonderful tonight. Okay, I've been busy. Hello all. Oh, me and one other person. Thank you for showing up. We'll start the replays here in a minute. I'm doing 2 of the high strangeness, 3 and 4. We haven't done all those yet. I'm trying to spread stuff out. We're running out of stuff. Believe we've almost gone through 2 years of stuff. It's amazing. Anyways, so I'm now spreading stuff out to make it last long. I hope everybody's good. Hope everybody had a good week. Hope they had some fun. Had fun last night with Gemma. Not some fun, but some fun, or at least had an enjoyable night. She's got a Monday video coming up. She's back. Well, let me switch over to the chat. Hey, Vixen Doe. Hello, dear. How are you? Well, yes. It's been a busy day, and I look at it, but it's good. We all kind of got a little busy. So, yeah, we're going to do 2 of the high strangeness, 3 and 4. So that should be good. And then we'll just go from there. Probably end it pretty much after that. It's usually the last few Saturdays have been kind of chill, which has been nice. A couple times I've had to end it, but that's all right. Things to do. She'll wear a hat. Can't wait till my hair grows back. At least a little longer. I hope everybody's good. I'm just wasting time until some people come in. I got it pretty much ready to go. At least, you know, I feel bad when people come in late, if they do stay, which is fine. And it's pretty much ready to go. No. This is going to have kind of an echo. This is when she was at her mom's a while back ago. This was 2 years ago. Let me put that down when it's ready to go. And I do want to do this. 1 sec. It's over here. Do this. Make sure it looks good. Looks fine. That's fine. Here we go. And then I'll share. If it'll let me. No. Don't do that. No. Hold on 1 sec. I screwed up my screen. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do either. I'll fix it. Excuse me. There we go. I made it bigger because it's bright on my camera. It gets real bright. Makes my head glow at night. Sorry for I am having trouble talking, so bear with me. Okay. Share. Much better. Get her in there. Switch back to how bad it looks. And I'll switch it this way. There we go. And that's her Monday video for Monday at 11. What's up for the high strangeness? Always up for that. Yeah, she did a bunch of them. So, and she's done more. So maybe I'll just do a bunch of those and take a break and do a bunch more. We didn't do them all. We did do the first 2. So, and then we'll do those. We'll do 2 of those tonight. And maybe I'll do 2 more next week. Yeah, so, but that's the scoop. If anybody else joins us, say hi. Or just sit back and relax. I am going to start it here pretty soon. What do I do? Okay, I'm just going to leave that up for a bit. And go from there. So how you doing, Vixen, since it seems to be just me and you right now? or whoever else. It is you, right, Vixen? I'm not sure if Edna will show up. Lots will probably pop in at one point. Maybe Nightmare. You know how it is. Coming and going. Okay, what's that? I'm just hanging loose until we're ready to do this. But somehow I screwed myself up. Oh, there we go. That's that. Oh, wait, what happened? Okay, we're cool. Okay, now I can see it. Well, if nobody's going to speak up, I'll get ready to start these. And let me pull this down. Turn it off. There we go. And get the next video ready to go. Let's do it this way. Looks good. There we go. Blow it up. And you guys ready? I'm doing okay. Finally getting some rain all day today. Some more tomorrow. We were rainy yesterday, off and on. It rained a lot in the morning, a little bit in the afternoon. Nothing today. It's just been chilly. I'd say we were in probably about the mid 60s. What are we now? We're probably about, well, we're 47 now. We're supposed to get chilly tonight. I do know that. Yeah, because when I went up to hand my son the Supp that finally showed up for him, he was all wrapped up in blankets. He goes, I don't want to turn on the heater. So it'll get chilly there the next couple of days. I guess it moves out that way and kind of moves upward. At least you're not getting snow or anything. That's good. You still may get some more, though. I'll just hang tight before I start this. Love that face. Should I let it go? Because that face is so funny. She's watching. She'll probably yell at me. Yell at me.
What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing High Strangeness Part 3.
You may have to adjust the sound, and she's got an echo.
Strange things that happen to us and in the world that are so incredibly strange and bizarre that they literally defy any other type of classification. What else do I name it, right? The first video I did was wild, and the second one was done just recently about Valiant Thor, the extraterrestrial visitor to the White House, Pentagon, and other places. I'll link them in the description box for any of you who haven't yet seen them or who want to watch them again, maybe get those views up. So grab a flashlight, make sure the batteries are almost dead, and let's walk in the dark in the places where there's no cell signal. Here's High Strangeness Part 3. Let's jump right in. Let's talk about a place in the United States that has approximately 3,470 square miles of desert and prairie
you may have to fix your sound if you come in.
South Dakota.
She was at her mom's when she reported this
Lakota Native American Reservation, also known as the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, because this is where our first encounter with the incredibly strange and bizarre.
Sounds like she's in your dining room.
This particular area has more than your average amount of darkness in the history surrounding it in general. It's the site of a somewhat infamous battle that took place in 1890. That's the Battle of Wounded Knee for all you history buffs. United States soldiers were merciless toward the Lakota Sioux tribes in the area and brutally massacred them. They didn't even spare the women or children. Aside from all of the blood and death in the history, though, it's a place of peace and serenity to most people.
Yeah, it just echoes a little.
Along with the majesty and beauty of the rolling hills, prairies, and plateaus, there is just as much mystery. There are more
Get that
legends
room
and
sound.
myths than I would even be able to cover here with you all just in this one
Guess I'm-
video. I mean,
No,
there's
actually,
a lot,
it
guys.
does
One
have
of
good
these
sound.
is a mysterious and very dark
It does
shadow
show up,
entity
though.
that's said to roam the entire
I
area
didn't
at
feel like
night,
typing yet.
and that has been said to do so for a very, very long time, possibly millennia. This entity is called mainly by 3 different names depending on who you ask or which area you're in at the time you're asking. He's Walking Sam, the Tall Man, and the Walking Man. What would I do without my air quotes? This lanky, long-armed entity is said to be about 7 feet tall and has a featureless face devoid of anything that could have a witness ever mistake it for a human once noticing it. This is what is described pretty much in
Hello,
every instance
newcomer.
of an
Stick
encounter,
around,
but
enjoy.
there are some variations. Some
Say hi
report
if
the
you want.
apparition as having glowing red eyes, and some say he wears a cloak and even at times a sort of stovepipe hat. In other cases, he is said to simply be an amorphous shadow entity with no actual shape to him/it at all. So there's this really strange description of an encounter with the same entity that appears in a book called In the Spirit of Crazy Horse, which was written in 1983 by author Peter Mathiasson. This account is said to have come from a Lakota medicine man, and he reported, quote, "There is your big man standing there, ever waiting, ever present, like the coming of a new day. He is both spirit and real being. But he can also glide through the forest like a moose with big antlers, as though the trees weren't there. I know him as my brother. I want him to touch me, just a touch, a blessing, something I could bring home to my sons and grandchildren, that I was there, that I approached him, and he touched me," end quote. So that's where this encounter ends. And that's kind of what's so bizarre to me, is that this medicine man thinks that for whatever reason, this thing is friendly. Now, I'm not saying it's definitely not a friendly specter, but I mean, let's look at the facts. From what we already know about most shadow entities, they are almost never friendly, if at all, right? I truly and wholeheartedly believe that this entity may have been putting this idea of kinship or friendship into the man's head. However, because we don't know what happened after this extremely short encounter with this entity, there's no way of knowing how it all worked and played out for this man. This shadow being is rumored to be anything from a demon to a random ghost to a skinwalker. It's just so unknown, there's no way to really tell for sure, and without any further information, I have no choice but to speculate. So, sometimes this thing is simply known to aimlessly wander, almost as if it's searching for something. There have been reports of it hitchhiking as well, but there are some other very sinister accounts as well that are a very stark contrast to what our medicine man friend experienced with this entity. It's said to kidnap people in the dead of night, and aside from the few aforementioned exceptions, it's almost always known in almost every instance as a malevolent creature or being that should be avoided at all costs. There was a witness who claims to have encountered this walking slam / tall man character on a dark and desolate back road when he was driving one night while just outside of Eagle Butte, South Carolina. This witness says he was terrified when he was confronted by what he described as not one, but 2 translucent humanoid entities. These entities obviously had more to them than what we get with our normal Glimmer Man encounters, because these 2 entities are described as having frightening and somewhat grotesque visages. He described them like this, quote, "It was glowing like a real dim light bulb because you can see through it. Eyes were the size of a human, really long nose in length. It was a really big mouth. Its arms were like sticks. They were parallel through each other. The sticks looked like it was glowing. It was around 4 foot tall, but its arms stretched. The other one on the left-hand side of the road had a face like a beast, horrifying, ugly, looked wrinkly, walked like a squat about the size of a goat. It was glowing too, reddish brown. It was wide and narrow," end quote. Now, there's one word that stood out to me here, and I had to make sure I read and then reread this encounter and description, and that is the word squat. I see this word in so many of the Glimmer Man encounters I come across, and when I had my own personal encounter with this creature, it was squatting in a tree. However, I know that isn't what he was technically saying here, but if you think about it, maybe they're always squatting because that's how they naturally walk and or move. I'm also not saying this is a Glimmer Man creature, but when I hear translucent humanoid, I kind of have to at least consider if this is that same entity. So first of all, I definitely don't think that this entity is the exact same as our Glimmer Man, so to speak, at least as we have come to know him / it. However, I also don't think that this entity, as described by our witness, is the typical sort of shadow creature or this creature Walking Sam either. So I don't necessarily think that this is a Walking Man encounter. Is it some sort of frightful combination of the two, or perhaps something else altogether? There is a little bit more on this one, though, in that the witness claims that one of the more disgusting creatures, quote unquote, phased into his car and actually rode along with him for several miles or more before once again vanishing into thin air. There's nothing more, though, about what happened in these moments when it was in his car. This leads me to believe that the terrified driver and terrifying specter didn't speak, and there was otherwise no interaction. I really don't understand why encounters end this way. Like, you can't just end an encounter with this thing rode along with you for miles and miles, and then that's it. Like, what was the interaction? Did it look at you? It drives me crazy, but that's all there is. Let's move on to another witness who had a very similar experience, again, right outside of Pine Ridge Reservation, this time in South Dakota. As he was driving along in the dead of night along one of the usual dark, desolate, and lonely roads where these things always seem to happen and take place, right? He saw on the side of the lonely road a hunched figure who was pacing back and forth and seemingly hitchhiking. Our witness pulled over, but when he did, it seemed as though the person or figure had somehow changed, and he was confronted with a tall, lanky man who was dressed in a top hat and some sort of black cape or cloak. The figure approached the vehicle before our witness even had time to get out of his car or honk his horn at it, thinking it was a hitchhiker who may have needed some help or perhaps a simple ride. Either way, the figure approached and started banging on the door and window, demanding to be let inside the car. He also demanded that he be given a ride. But here's the thing, guys. This man, creature, thing, it had no face. Obviously, our witness was frightened beyond anything we could imagine and drove off as fast as possible, never looking back. So one question I have here is, if this thing had no features and or no face, then how did it demand verbally to be let in and given a ride? Was it telepathic, or was it somehow or otherwise speaking clearly from its non-mouth? He later told of his experience to some locals and was informed he had indeed had an encounter with what they all called the Walking Sam entity. As bizarre and completely off the charts as this all seems already, there's actually a newer twist to this story / these encounters that's been coming up in more recent and modern day encounters with it. It's been being blamed for people taking their own lives. Touchy subject, guys, trigger warning. It started in 2009 when some teenagers who were hanging out and doing whatever it is the kids are doing these days were approached by an entity. It was first reported, as far as I can tell, by some kids on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation who reported being approached by a tall, lanky-looking, quote-unquote, wraith-like shadow entity which spoke directly to them and told them that they should take their own lives. I had to clean up what's said here for YouTube guys to protect my monetization, but it said 2 words which started with the letters K and Y. Blank yourself. And it began with a K, okay, not an F. The teenagers claimed that they knew for sure that this was the Walking Sam figure they had been hearing about from all of the tribe and local legends they grew up with their whole lives. During the encounters, there's far more than just one here, guys. They allegedly all felt some sort of strange compulsion to obey the entity and carry out its dark demands, which were, in some cases, mere suggestions. However, when a supernatural being is compelling you to do something, there's not much about it that's voluntary, right? I mean, a lot of us know this from actual personal experience. I know I do. The teenagers described it almost as though its commands were a worm that wriggled itself into their brains and nested somehow that they couldn't get it out of there. Almost everyone local and on the reservations especially, with very few exceptions, believe that this entity is absolutely real, as are the encounters, and much more than mere made-up legends and myths. During a tribal council meeting, one of the tribe's elders made a statement where he informed the general public that they are, in fact, whether they believed it or not, familiar with the entity. A blogger who was present named Mike Crowley wrote this, quote, "The woman, who was elderly but otherwise quite lucid, described Walking Sam as a big man in a tall hat who has appeared around the reservation and caused young people to take their own life." Paraphrase. She said that Walking Sam has been picked up on the police scanners, but that the police have not been able to protect the community from him. She described him as a bad spirit. She wanted help from Washington with foot patrols for the tribal communities to protect them from Walking Sam, end quote. So assuming that all of this is true, it seems as though the entity has been very successful in its mission thus far. In 2013 alone, there were reportedly 5 suicides on that particular reservation, which made it much higher than at any other time in the known history. By 2014, things had gone completely off the charts, with some reporting there to be at least 103 official S-word attempts on the reservation, and some people claim there were actually as many as 240, with 9 people between the ages of 12 and 24 succeeding in their attempts. I want to say here too that I have no idea what, quote, walking Sam was picked up on the police scanners, end quote, means. Maybe it means that people calling in sightings of him were heard throughout the community by just not the police, but to any and all locals who had personal scanners. Again, though, I have no clue and can't be sure, but when something like this is reported in such a confusing way, it's really hard to tell. I do my best for you guys, but sometimes I don't know. So anyways, most of these cases, whether attempted or actually successful, were done by the people hanging themselves. To make this even more insane and even more eerie, Vice President Thomas Poorbear of the Oglala Sioux tribe stated that there were more than several nooses randomly hanging from tree limbs in the wilderness areas surrounding the reservation near a place called Porcupine. When the police went there in order to remove these nooses that seemed to be randomly hanging there was then a group of teenagers who had allegedly gathered in order to take their own lives in a mass teenager taking of their own lives thing. Sorry, guys, again, I'm not allowed to say the S word, so I'm really trying to find my way around it here. Stay with me. It was claimed by every single one of those teenagers and the aforementioned elder of the reservation that Walking Sam had told them all to do it. Most people in the area attribute all of this to some sort of mystical or mythical figure, but there are some people who think that the rampant drug abuse and poverty in the area are the cause, and that many people have either created or chose to believe in this sort of phantom interloper in order to explain it all away or take the blame off of what the trouble actually is. Without delving deep into the many very real problems and issues going on in a lot of the reservations, not only around this area, but all over the United States, because that's not the point here. It's a huge point to make, but it's not the point here for this video. I will mention that there's tons of poverty, substance abuse, poor medical care, little to no clean water, etc., etc. And blogger Mike Crowley said this of it all, quote, Walking Sam may be just one such explanation that resonates among some of the Lakota for teen S-words, taking your own lives. I don't know how to do it. It shouldn't distract the reader from the fact that people on the reservations are distraught, whether Walking Sam represents Bigfoot, an evil spirit, or is just a manifestation of the fear that people have about losing their loved ones to what seems an incomprehensible type of event. The teen S-words are real, end of quote. So what's really going on here? What's going on specifically in this particular stretch of Badlands and in these sparsely populated areas? Is there really an ancient spirit wandering among the tribes and locals? And if so, what is it? Where did it come from? And why is it so active in the last 20 years or so? Like way more than before that. It's existed, I'm sure, for millennia now, if it actually does exist. So why now? I definitely have my own opinions and theories on this, and I can sum it all up for you guys simply by saying that I believe all of the devastation, all of the destruction to their way of life is most likely something that this thing or these things, whatever they are, is feeding on. All right. So do I know if it's the cause? No, it probably is the cause for most of it. But do I definitely pretty much know for a fact that whatever this thing is or these things are is feeding on all of this negativity, death, destruction, etc.? Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Grief and fear, heartache and anger, and all of those other lower vibrational energies, emotions, and feelings certainly seem to be a tasty treat for evil and malevolent creatures and beings all over the world. So why would it be any different here? Does this particular entity have any connection to any of the otherworldly creatures and supernatural beings we've been seeing so much more of since the turn of the century 22 years ago? The Glimmer Man, the Hat Man, shadow entities, reptilians. I mean, these are definitely entities and energies that have existed and that there have been reports about for millennia, for a really long time at least. But in the past 22 years or so, they've gotten a lot more visible. I don't know why that is. I have my theories on that. I'm sure I have really no actual idea though, guys, but I can't wait to see what you all think in the comments below. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, hanging out with me, and if you just want to see me smile. Spread the love by sharing this video. Let's get that sub count up, guys. Please, please, please sub count up. Spread the love, share the video. I don't know why I just did that in a robot voice. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And if you know anyone that would like this content, please suggest it to them. Really, I'm trying to get that sub count up. Live every Wednesday night from 7:15 to 11:15.
Actually, live on Friday nights at 7:15. So join us then. And like I said, she has got a video coming out Monday. So we're going to do the next one, which is High Strangeness 4. I got to get to it. I hope everybody's having a good night. Relax, enjoy it. I'm just chilling tonight with you guys. This is probably what I'd be doing anyways. I don't know if I'd be watching. I do go back and watch a lot of her older stuff. I may, when I start running out of the paranormal stuff, I'll start doing her like missing cases and 411 cases, missing person cases and all that stuff. True crime stuff. Okay, now just get grip here. Got distracted. Yeah, because there's a whole lot of high strangeness ones that she did. And she did much more over the last year, so we'll just kind of spread them out. They're kind of good ones because they got a little bit of everything. Okay, should we get to it here soon? One second. Sorry for the dead air. Dead air. Dead air. Hold on. What's up, Steve? Okey-dokey. That's like gracefully incredible. Okay, okay. 1 second, we'll get there. So you got 5, and then she just lost count after part 5. That's what I thought. After High Strangeness part 5, she lost count. So she just said she was just calling them High Strangeness. That's why I had a hard time because I was looking for an order. Okay, there's 3, and here's 4. 4 is a little longer. Yep, Pink Panther theme song. Never to place. Yeah, it was immediately what popped in my head was Pink Panther. I love those cartoons, and the Aardvark and the Ant. Those are some of my favorites. Roadrunner, and then you get into Looney Tunes. I was a Looney Tunes kid, big time. And the Super Friends, Hanna-Barbera. Okay, 1 sec. We'll get this going. Another one at her mom's. The same type of audio, so you might have to adjust your headsets or however you're listening. And here we go. High Strangeness 4. Let me get it on the screen. Make sure we're good. Put it down here. And then I'll make her a little bigger. There we go. Like I said, you might have to adjust your headsets or your speakers, okay? Because I hear an echo, but I'm also listening to the actual feed. So here we go.
Welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to
be discussing
bizarre encounters with possible interdimensionals, aka High Strangeness 4. With all of the strange, bizarre, and downright weird entities and creatures I discuss with you all here on this channel, there is bound to be some encounters and information that I come across that I can't quite classify. And that's why I was going to title this one Possible Interdimensionals. We pretty much know where angels, demons, and even aliens come from. At least for the most part, we feel confident we do, right? Sometimes, though, I come across some entity or creature that I simply cannot place, and that isn't something commonly encountered in the community, and it definitely isn't talked about a lot. You guys gave me such amazing and great feedback with one of the most recent videos that I did, High Strangeness 3, and that's where I discussed entities just like these ones, only of the presumably spirit in nature, possibly even a shadow being, the walking Sam entity. So I thought I'd put out High Strangeness 4 right away, because when you guys speak and give me such great responses, I like to give you as much of that content as I possibly can for you to watch and listen to. Even the aforementioned entities, who some of us think we know so much about, and most of us here in this community are pretty confident that we know where they come from at least, are really almost just as elusive as with each encounter. We are almost always left with more questions than answers. And that's a fact. These entities that we're discussing today, though, guys, in my opinion, are well beyond what we would consider bizarre, to be honest, and are possibly setting the bar for a whole new meaning of the word fringe. They're crazy. So these entities all seem to have one thing in common, and that's that they don't even seem to live up to the word paranormal and could very well be from another universe, another galaxy, another dimension or realm, or somewhere else that we haven't even considered altogether. So put on your tinfoil hats and get yourselves comfy as we investigate some encounters with truly out of this world and possibly off of this plane entities. Let's jump right in. In 1973, on the Isle of Wight in the small town of Sandown in the more eastern region of England, a 7-year-old little girl and a friend were out exploring some woods near their home. It was May and the weather was nice, and it seemed the perfect day to be out in the fresh air and playing. The area was known as the Shanklin and Sandown Golf Club, and the little girls were startled when all of a sudden they started hearing a weird, shrill cry echoing through the woods. It was described as a piercing sound and was likened to an ambulance siren. It was reverberating out of the woodlands and into the surrounding areas. It wasn't like a normal ambulance siren, though, which normally would be mainly described as annoying and loud, as the girls later described this one as creepy and off somehow. It was immediately clear that it wasn't a sound that belonged there in the forest or anywhere else in the general vicinity. Despite being creeped out and even a little frightened, they did what most kids their age would do and continued to investigate the noise. They were curious more than scared and tried to track down where it was coming from. They followed the sound and it led them to a property adjoining the nearby Sandown Airport. Once they reached this general area, though, the sound stopped all at once and just as suddenly as it had started, and the silence that lingered was even more eerie than the noise itself, at least in that moment. The two girls continued in their search and didn't have to go very far before finding the source of the strange and shrill noise. They crossed a nearby footbridge that went over a creek, and what they saw was literally beyond explanation. They didn't see it immediately, but it slowly rose up from underneath the bridge they stood on, seemingly coming from the depths of the creek below. Not that creeks are very deep, and in all actuality, it could have just been hiding underneath the bridge in general because it wasn't wet. That's something we might never know, but you all have such attention for detail, I figured I should clarify that one thing here. So anyways, a creature that looked to be some sort of abomination, even as far as creatures and even monsters go, crawled out on all fours at first and then stood upright facing them. And they said it was unlike not only anything they had ever seen, but also very much unlike anything that they had ever been able to even imagine or come up with on their own in their minds. In an article on the encounter published in a 1978 edition of the British UFO Research Association's journal, author Norman Oliver described the encounter like this, quote, "He was nearly 7 feet tall and had no neck, for his head appeared to be wedged straight onto his shoulders. He wore a yellow pointed hat, which interlocked with the red collar of a tattered green tunic. A round black knob was affixed to the top of his head, and wooden antennae were attached to each side. The face had triangular markings for eyes, a brown square of a nose, and motionless yellow lips. Other round markings were on his paper white face, and a fringe of red hair fell down onto his forehead. Wooden slats protruded from his sleeves and from below his white trousers," end quote. My first thought when reading this quote was that the children were referring to this thing as a he. This struck me because I've explained to you guys and others so many times that as human beings, when encountering the supernatural, otherworldly, paranormal, extraterrestrial, etc., we are sometimes able to instinctively, whether we realize it at the time or not, know what the gender of an unknown and seemingly non-binary entity or creature is. But later I come to realize why they spoke of him as a he. Either that or they simply said he for a number of other reasons, one of which is the lack of any description of breasts. The other thing that almost immediately caught my attention is research that I've been compiling on people who believe they have encountered literal stick figures. So stay tuned for that one, guys. Otherwise, the description makes me think of one of those old creepy scarecrow Halloween masks, but I don't know. It's definitely up to your own personal interpretation because, again, it's unlike anything we've ever come across before, at least as far as what I've reported on this channel. So the encounter doesn't end there, though, because the girls then described the creature as having what looked to be a regular old human-made book, like one you'd find in any library anywhere. He seemed very clumsy and unpracticed, though, as he fumbled through the pages and stared at the girls. After a moment or two, the book fell from his hands. Accidentally, he lost his grip on it, and it fell into the creek below. The entity or whatever it was leapt over the bridge and into the creek, grabbed its book, and then crawled back out of the water once again to face them. It was soaking wet, as was the book, and the little girls were stunned and frozen in place with a mixture of awe and fear. Obviously. The being then turned after a second and started jumping through the woods away from them, but the series of leaps and bounds he performed seemed to be more suited for someone perhaps not subject to our human rules of gravity. They seemed to be impossible feats of movement through the air, and within seconds, it was no longer in sight of the witnesses, as it had seemingly gone inside of what looked to be some sort of metallic hut type thing that was not off too far in the near distance, and then re-emerged with something else in its hands. This time, though, instead of a sopping wet library book, it had what resembled a microphone attached to a thin wire to a black box with a knob or two on it. It was either a knob or a button, the girls couldn't be sure. Once the being either pressed the button or turned the knob, that strange and creepy piercing wailed through the air again, and the girls flinched in reaction to the suddenly hearing the assault on their ears again, as up until then, and since the last time it stopped, the woods had been abnormally and eerily quiet. This time they were so close to the sound that they turned and ran from it, terrified to their very core, and their ears feeling like they would bleed because the sound was so abrasive to them. As they ran off in horror, though, the wailing all at once stopped again and was replaced by a voice that sounded as though it were coming through the woods from a loudspeaker asking, quote, "Are you still there?" End quote. Now, these little girls were admittedly terrified and very confused at this point, but they were also only 7 years old, and their curiosity once again got the best of them as they turned back towards where they had just moments ago fled from in order to further investigate what in the world was happening with this creature and the microphone it was now addressing them through. When it saw them approaching again, they said it almost immediately looked like it was happy to see them again, as it started sort of dancing around in a jig and then produced the wet book from behind itself, so probably pulled it out of the pocket or something. It then proceeded to write a message to them in the ruined book, and it held the book with the message up for them to read. The handwriting was scrawled and childlike. Even to 7-year-old children, it seemed like it was written by a much younger child. However, it was legible and they could read it, and they claimed it said, quote, "Hello, and I am all colors Sam," end quote. The girls conversed with Sam for a little while, and throughout the course of this conversation, the entity did tell them that it wasn't human, and so the girls asked him if he was a ghost, to which he replied, quote, "Not really, but I am in an odd sort of way," end quote. The girls continued to ask the entity what he was, and finally he looked at them and in a sort of cryptic way replied, quote, "You know," end quote. This Sam entity would further explain that he wasn't the only one of his kind here on this planet or in this dimension or whatever, but that the others were almost always afraid of humans, and even when they weren't, they're really shy about interacting with them. Eventually, he invited the girls into his metallic windowless hut, the one that he had gone into just moments earlier to retrieve that microphone. It had a flap as a door and was odd shaped and very much out of place in the middle of the woods between an airport and a golf course. The girls, for whatever reason, accepted his invitation and went inside this entity's little hut, this all-color Sam's house. They saw it had 2 stories and metal flooring and ceilings. There were all kinds of strange-looking knobs, buttons, and dials all over the walls. The place seemed exclusively furnished in wooden furniture that was falling apart or rotting or otherwise damaged. So the fact that it's metallic, that it's weird shaped, and then it had these knobs and buttons all over the walls did immediately make me think of spaceship. But All Colors Sam said that he was kind of a ghost. So I don't know. I'm thinking extraterrestrial now. You guys have got to let me know what you think about this one. The place was a total dump, and it must have shown on the girls' faces as Sam seemed to see their disdain for his dwelling and quickly assured them that it was only his temporary residence and that he actually lived in a very large and modernized, luxurious building on the mainland in England. As if things couldn't get much stranger, this is when he removed his little hat and pulled a berry out of it. He shoved the berry into his ear, it came out his right eye socket, and then, with a simple quick nod of his head, it shot out of his mouth. It seems as though he was trying really hard to entertain the girls and keep them there with him. It worked too, because this little magic trick made the girls giggle and clap in delight, and they weren't at all scared of All Colors Sam anymore. They hung out with this strange entity, which honestly keeps making me think, for reasons I can't quite point out, of the scarecrow from the original Wizard of Oz movie, for about an hour until finally they said goodbye and left the hut in order to traverse the woods back home. One of the little girls immediately told her father what she and her friend had witnessed, and instead of just dismissing it as a child's strange imagination like most adults still do, and also probably out of some sort of fear that there was this creep guy luring kids into a hut in the woods, he immediately took his daughter and went to where she said she had first met the interdimensional interloper. So he didn't waste any time because he thought this guy was some sort of prevert. You guys know what I mean. Once the dad and the daughter got to the spot, though, there was nothing there to ever indicate that there had been a hut or anything else out of the ordinary. No one else in the area ever reported seeing anything like what was described, either at the time, before, or after, and in fact, no one else ever reported hearing the strange wailing noise, which had originally lured the little girls in the first place. So, what was this thing? Was it a sicko human being who, for whatever reason, dressed up in this strange and extremely convincing costume simply to lure little kids and perform oddball magic tricks, then allow them to leave his little hut without any kind of incident? Was it an alien, an extraterrestrial, a ghost, or something else altogether? Something from either another dimension or another universe entirely? Much of what I came across in my source material as far as speculation was people saying that Sam had to have been from another universe, but to me that would make him/it a sort of extraterrestrial, right? Because ETs come from outer space, no matter which galaxy, planet, or universe they come from. But I don't know. I could be wrong on that. So as always, respectfully, let me know. And I'm dying to hear your thoughts on this one for sure. Despite there being no trace of anything they had described, the girls were adamant that they had been telling the truth about all of it, and that they were also quite sure of where the hut had been and where the entity had emerged from under the bridge there that day. So they knew that right at this little footbridge was where the hut was. So it wasn't like they were confused about where it was located. There wasn't any indentations in the ground. There was nothing under the bridge. The entity quickly became known as the Sandown Clown and hasn't ever been seen or heard from again, at least not reportedly anyways. As there's not a shred more information on this creature, we will most likely never know, and that's extremely frustrating. I know, guys, I feel the same way. Believe me. Believe me. I searched. So one thing that stuck out to me, well, several things stuck out to me here, and they're probably quite obvious, but one specific thing was that the sighting was a complete and total one-off. This isn't the only encounter with a strange and unknown being or entity where it was only witnessed one time and never again, and not by a long shot either. Our next one comes from the site The Crypto Crew and took place the year I was born. It was a good year and a great decade, 1983. Our witness is a woman who is only known by the name Patty. She was innocently driving down a rural part of Highway 94 one day in broad daylight when she had her shockingly bizarre encounter with an incredibly strange entity. She was approximately 11 miles from the town of Murray, Kentucky in the United States. What she saw defies any sort of classification known to me or anyone else, and that's really saying something considering all of the newer, I use that term loosely, entities we've been bombarded with encounters of in the past 2 years or so, or even in the last decade or so, if I'm being completely honest. As Patty drove, there were wide open fields on either side of the highway, and something suddenly jumped right out in front of her car, scaring her half to death and forcing her to slam on her brakes. After jumping out in front of her vehicle, Patty said the entity simply, quote unquote, walked across the road to the other side. She described the way it walked as, quote, like a gorilla, end quote. However, it was shockingly clear that this was no gorilla, again I say, by a long shot. For some reason, though, Patty decided to pull her car over, get out, and yell to the strange creature. The thing stopped at the sound of her voice yelling to it and turned to face her. This is when she got a much better look at what she was dealing with, and fear and dread burned and boiled up immediately inside of her, and she said it penetrated her to her very core and bones. She described it as completely hairless and at least 7 feet tall. It had an abnormally long neck, and its skin was rough and bright pink. It had a tiny head, pointed ears, and a pig's snout furry nose. Patty described her encounter further by saying, quote, I would describe it as a cross between a primate, a pig, and a human, end quote. She said it was the entity's face that was most noticeable to her, and she froze in her tracks when it turned and locked eyes with her. She claimed its eyes were intelligent and knowing somehow, and she further described it as, quote, remarkably human, end quote. Patty was so troubled by its gaze on her that she slowly started backing away in order to get back into her vehicle and to get out of there like a bat out of hell as fast as she possibly could. She made it to the car and immediately locked all of the doors. This thing was standing directly in front of her car now, unflinching as she slammed on the horn and unmoving as she stared it down through the windshield in complete and total horror. After it stared at her for what seemed like an eternity, but admittedly was probably only about another minute, it continued on its way across the road, and Patty hightailed it out of there. I don't blame her. She left the entity far behind and well beyond the view of her own rearview mirror. Once she was home, she told her husband what she had seen, but he flat out didn't believe her and basically said she was lying and crazy. Our next encounter comes from a woman we only know as Jenny, who told her story to Lon Strickler of Phantoms and Monsters. At the Hampton Bays in New York in 2006, Jenny brought her fiance to show him one of her favorite sights in the area, which were the incandescent shrimp that glittered in the darkened waters underneath in the nearby beach. It was a remote area, but decidedly romantic, at least up until the encounter happened and put quite the damper on their otherwise pleasant and intimate rendezvous. Jenny explained, quote, as soon as we stepped onto the beach, I had a feeling of general unease, that instinctive fear that one would experience in the presence of a predator. I chose to ignore it, occasionally peeking over my shoulder at the long, empty stretch of beach behind me, but mostly focusing on the tiny glowing shrimp beneath our feet. At one point, I felt a presence and again chose to ignore it as I've dealt with that quite a bit in my 30 years. I had not voiced my unease to my fiance, so he was completely unaware. About 5 to 10 minutes into our short walk, we were both hunched over, his back facing the jetty, mine facing the stretch of empty beach, when he started peering over my shoulder up into the sky. Perplexed, he'd look for a second, then look away. At this point, I was still trying to retain my composure and not look. Finally, after a few minutes, he looked over my head and yelled, "Oh my God, what is that?" I turned to look, and flying directly over my head was this huge creature I'd never seen. It appeared translucent/transparent, no color whatsoever, no visible structure outside of the motion, which indicated what it looked like. Now, I myself am a visual artist, so this left a very distinct impression on me. This creature was shaped and moving in the way a manta ray would, yet completely transparent. No color at all. I could see the stars through this thing. The only thing to allow the structure any appearance was the moonlight shining somehow on its exterior. It was larger than a standard sedan. Its wingspan was at least, from what I could estimate, 10 feet in width. While it was flying, its wings moved up and down. The movement seemed familiar, like that of a gull swooping down and hovering over the shoreline. It was approximately 10 to 15 feet over my head. It had no visible head or tail, no discernible limbs or appendages of any kind. It appeared and moved exactly as a manta ray without the cephalic lobes or tail. I was completely awestruck, but then the fear took over, and after about 30 seconds of staring at this thing, we both turned and bolted toward the car. While running, we both simultaneously jerked our heads to the right in response to a glowing green light, which seemed to flash twice. It was not the light from the tower on the jetty, nor was it from any boat. That water was clear. I never looked behind me. We started heading back on Dune Road when we saw what I could only describe as two smaller rays, which moved like a bat would, flying together from right to left overhead past our car. These two were transparent but had a grayish color to them. Strange. They were flying in the direction of the beach where the larger, more transparent creature was. It was so beautiful and so strange. It reminded me more of a sea creature than anything else. Maybe our air is like water to them, end quote. Well, I don't even know what to do with that one, guys. What do you all think? I'm dying to hear your theories and opinions so far. The first thing that came to my mind with that report, the report of it being so very translucent, was the cloaking done by both the Glimmerman entity, but also by extraterrestrials when they use such devices on their crafts and ships so as not to be seen by us when they're in our atmosphere. This seems like something similar, but altogether different at the same time. And it's really intriguing me to the point where I am going to start looking for more instances like this. Our final encounter happened in Caceres, Spain, back in the summer of 1965. It was August to be exact, and our witnesses are a man named Juan Dominguez and his sister Isabel. They were out for a stroll together one day along the countryside, bringing some bundles of peaches home, and were passing right outside of the village of Fragosa at the time of their bizarre and seemingly unclassifiable encounter. They approached a low wall surrounding a garden and noticed an odd figure they couldn't quite make out what it was and were sure they had never seen before. It was described by our witnesses as pacing back and forth along the wall of the garden. As they approached it, the siblings noticed the creature was emitting a sound they likened to a human being humming. Very quickly, though, the humming sound emanating from this thing became irrelevant, as bizarre as it was, and that's because they were able to get closer still and really get a good look at this thing. Once again, so 3 encounters or 4 encounters, and once again, the entity was 7 feet tall. This one with arms that were so thin and long, it wasn't possible in any way that it could have been a human. The entity itself was described as opaque and seemed to be made up of something gelatinous, goo type substance that not only glistened in the summer sun, but also pulsated nonstop and with every step it took. It had something that looked like it could be called a head, but nothing that could be considered a face. But somehow the pair knew that the thing was watching them and watching them rather intently too. Again, as the siblings stared in horror and confusion, the entity suddenly stopped its incessant pacing and turned to face them. Then it quickly started walking toward them, almost in a run. They had no intention of waiting around to see why it was approaching or what it wanted, and they immediately turned and fled home as fast as they could, and they never came across the entity again and never heard of anyone else having ever encountered it. So once again, it immediately reminded me of the Glimmer Man, aside from the pulsating and slightly more goopy appearance. I had someone, Sirach, their name was Sirach, and there was like some numbers after it, who had an encounter with a jellyfish, but it was glowing in orange. This thing reminds me of like a giant humanoid walking jellyfish. So I am going to look for more encounters with all 4 of these creatures, okay, and see if I can bring you more. But for now, are they interdimensional interlopers? Are they just regular extraterrestrials that we just, there are so many extraterrestrials, I'm sure, that we have no idea. I mean, think of the universe in its entirety, and every single star and every single planet and every single whatever, right? I don't know a lot about astronomy, but you guys know what I mean. So with that, but why are we suddenly seeing them now? Or is the question, is it like people are being able to report it more widely now? So I think that might also be it. That's all I have for you today, guys. But don't worry, there are so many more entities like this and so much more information on entities that defy any sort of classification, like I said. And I plan on continuing to post them as much as I can while still leaving room for the massive variety you have all hopefully come to know and love from my channel. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, and if you just want to see me smile. Spread the love by sharing this video, guys. I really need to get my sub count up. Really, really, really. I love and appreciate all of you so very much. I'm going to try to start remembering on Mondays and Thursdays and whenever I upload to pop into the premiere. And anyone in there, I'm just going to randomly choose someone to be given a personal intuitive oracle reading if that's what you guys want. I'm also going to be raffling off books. Guys, speaking of books, I have some left over from this signing. So
Sorry about that. 1 second here. Yeah, I'll probably shut it off at midnight. Yeah. I hope everybody enjoyed those that count them out. I don't know who's still left, but that's you, Vixen. Thank you for hanging out with me. And everybody that popped in and out. Yeah, I figured it'd be a short night. These views are, I'm going to do something different, I think. Let me fix this. Look, I don't like hogging the screen. I think next week I'm going to do something a little different. On these high strangeness, some of the videos I'll just play through and do it like I did tonight and let you guys chat with you folks in the stream. And then on like ones like this one, it's a bunch of stories, we'll listen to the story, then we'll stop and talk about it. I'll put my 2 cents in. But it looks like that's going to be the plan because I want to spice it up a little bit. People come and go. I want people to come in and interact. I'm not getting that too much right now. And I want to change that because I want to make this fun and so something good. So, and things go up and down. Ways things have been for everybody right now. I understand it's a little blah. Everybody's looking for someone with a little more hype. So we'll kind of spice it up. We'll try to spice it up. I have some plans for coming Wednesday too. So I'm going to actually tell some stories. I'm going to go into it and try not to let you guys distract me. And we'll go from there. And Gemma's planning on some changes too. So, but she will be here Monday at 11 p.m. 11 a.m. Sorry, for her Monday upload. And that is, I believe, The House of 333. Let me make sure I get this right because I don't want to screw it up. I just had it on you too. Come on, why isn't that going? Did I freeze? Hold on. I don't know if you guys can hear me or not. Oh gosh, what happened? What happened? Uh-oh. Let me try something here. I'm froze. No, 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 no. What is going on? What is going on? I am completely froze. Okay, there we go. 1 second. Cancel. Okay, 1 second here. There we go. Okay, let me clean that off. I don't know what happened. I froze. I'm probably the only one left. I'm still froze on here. That was weird. I don't know what happened there. Maybe it's time to go. Hold on, let me see if I refresh this, see what happens. Man, I completely froze up. Oh, much better. Was I frozen? If anybody was still watching, was I froze? Because my whole screen froze. I had too many screens up trying to clean house. All right. Well, since we got quiet, it's been an hour. I hope the folks that came in and watched a little bit enjoyed. Vixen, thank you for hanging out with me. It means a lot. And I'll be here Wednesday. I'll be here probably in the chat Monday night. Monday afternoon for the 11 a.m. upload. And I'm just going to call it a night. That was fun. Take care. Have a good one. Good night. Have a good one. Thank you, Vixen.